right, here we go. Standard disclaimer. It is change, continuing change, inevitable change, that is the dominant factor in society today. No sensible decision can be made any longer without taking into account not only the world as it is, but as the world as it will be. Science fiction author Isaac Asimov said this in 1978, and I think you all agree that it's probably even more relevant now than it was 40 years ago. So first, we're going to jump in and get everybody on the same page, and then we'll dive into the use case of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and its automation of the certificate lifecycle.
When we think about access management, it's often in the context of human access. But modern enterprises average 45 machine identities for every human one. The USPTO faced a daunting challenge, managing over 10,000 certificates manually, leading to outages and vulnerabilities. With a workforce reliant on bots, machines, and automation, implementing identity and certificate management isn't a tactical exercise, it's a strategic imperative. Manual processes and workflows lead to scalability issues, policy inconsistencies, and inevitable human errors that cause service disruptions and security vulnerabilities. Today, our human representative will guide you through our modernization of USPTO's certificate and identity management and discuss the advantages these improvements provide. The floor is yours, Leone.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to spend the next half an hour or so, and then we'll do some Q&A afterwards. And we're just going to talk a little bit about what happened at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and why we ended up going with automation for our certificate lifecycle management. We'll talk a little bit about what that is, about what the issues are. Let me first ask you guys a thing. I'm going to assume that this is my first RSA conference, so yay, first-timers. Anybody out there? Awesome. All right, so how many of you have been around for, I'm not going to show my age, long enough that when you wanted to stand up a server, you just slapped an OS onto it, you put some content, you started serving. That's it, right? Back in the day before, remember, other people are why we can't have nice things. Back in the day, I used to just put a server up. I ran a comic book webzine when I was 18. Ooh. And I didn't really have to worry too much about what was going to be broken into, and more importantly, what breaking into my server might do to something else. Well, things progress. People started hacking into individual servers. You put them behind firewalls. Now you have to have everything under SSL. That's not enough. You need mutual TLS. That's not enough. Now we're getting into zero trust because I don't trust anybody anymore. And the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office is in that exact same boat. So let me take a step back and just talk about what USPTO is. It's not like a lot of the other government agencies out there. In fact, there's something like less than 5% of government agencies are fee-funded. So what that means is if you don't need patents and you don't need trademarks, then you're not funding the USPTO. But I'm pretty sure, especially here at RSA, there might be at least a couple of patent holders out in the audience. And if that's the case, then you've used these services, you've provided fees to get that patent or that trademark, and we use those fees in order to continue to provide innovative services to the innovators of the US. So we are supporting entrepreneurs everywhere. Now, as a 100% fee-funded organization, it's run more like a commercial business than it is like a government agency. So that means we have to be very careful with how we treat the data of our end users. We have to be very careful with the kind of permissions that we allow. And we have to be very careful about the user experience. So right in the bottom there's something that says the downtime slows the processing of patent and trademark applications, which does have a real commercial impact, especially for those of you who have patents that might have services or products that are unique and you don't want your competitors to get to market first. So how do we bridge the two here? We're looking at business need and business impact from the USPTO's perspective. Well, we're going to look a little bit at what USPTO actually is. So right now, it's got about 10,000 servers, all of which require some sort of certificate because as a government agency, it needs to be aligned with a White House memorandum called M2209, which is zero trust. Or as I like to call it, I don't trust you and I'm going to verify anyways. So we, at USPTO, we have everything in the hybrid multi-cloud environment. PTO has a multi-cloud initiative in order to make sure that if any one of the clouds were to have any sort of issue or breach or downtime, that we would still be able to serve our end users, you guys. Again, the M2209, and then the business, what we're looking at from a business impact is to decrease the outages. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure I kind of talked about when you talk about why is certificate lifecycle management important and why is automating it important. And one of the reasons is because between 2022 and 2023, we had 8 major incidents that were the direct result of certificates being expired or a compromise that came through it. Something like, I think Venafi says 50% of the attacks that come in are usually through some sort of SSL-based attack. Now, because of those 8 attacks, we lost 200 hours of downtime. And that 200 hours could have been avoided if we had had a better certificate management system in place. And one of the reasons why it takes so long is because sometimes looking up your certificate and making sure that it's not expired is the last thing you think to do as a systems administrator. I'm always looking for the hard thing first, right? Actually, as a sysadmin, I'm always looking for what the developers did first. So, you know, what application did they put out? What happened with the newest release? And then sometimes I realize it's my fault. I had a certificate, it needed to be renewed, and I hadn't realized that it needed to be renewed. Because I don't know about you guys, but renewing a certificate used to be one of those things where, a server lasts 3 to 5 years? Well, my certificate is going to last 3 to 5 years too. Why not? Again, as I said before, other people are why we can't have nice things. So a 3-year certificate makes 0 sense to everybody, right? So let's move on to the next one. That moves us right into costs. So as USPTO grows, as any company or government organization grows, these items are going to take longer and longer and longer to do. And so those operational costs are naturally going to go up. So at USPTO, it takes about 10 hours to get a certificate onto a server. Now, at first you're looking at it and you're like, wow, 10 hours, that's ridiculous. But let's think about it. It's a government organization, so there has to be separation of duties. So I am one person. I cannot go soup to nuts from the server, the application, the certificate, getting the certificate from the certificate authority and putting it back on. It takes about 3 different teams to do that. And that's because with separation of duties and areas of responsibility, you can make sure that you don't have people who are going to take advantage of everything, right? You're doing operational security and personnel security at that point, which is just as important, even if it's not necessarily within the context of this particular conference. So 10 hours, so I'm a person, I've requested a certificate. Somebody from my PKI team needs to create a CSR. They send that over to the certificate authority. That could take a while. We're not sure. We're hoping that it's a pretty quick turnaround. That would be great. And then they bring it back. The systems administrator applies it to the server, and now everything is good. So those 10 hours actually takes place over multiple days because it is highly unlikely that as a sysadmin, I can go, hey, PKI person, can I get that certificate? Oh, sure, let me drop everything. And I'll work on your certificate right now. So there's usually some time lost in that as well, in everybody's queues. So this is where the USPTO was today. Well, was 2 years ago. Sorry about that. So what are the challenges of certificate management? Everyone understands that it's good, but it's pretty labor intensive. I just went over exactly how labor intensive that was. But there's also governance. Governance is an interesting issue because if you leave it up to, we have 100 systems engineers right now. If you leave it up to 100 systems engineers to determine what to do with certificates, you will probably get about 100 different ways that the certificate is done, 100 different ways for what they're going to determine is the best for their particular servers, right? And that's interesting as a concept, but it's not sustainable. It's going to be highly breachable, and you talk about that loss of tribal knowledge when someone like wins the lottery or goes on to their new job. Now the other persons who might have picked up their responsibilities, they don't know what's happening. They don't know what went on. So things are prone to error at that point, either because you don't know exactly how it was set up at the beginning, or because you set it up a year ago and you don't know what needs to happen now, or maybe you're so inundated with work that you don't see that email, and there's a delayed response. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of have a lot to do every day. And if you have a lot to do every day and you're getting that email that says in 30 days, your cert's going to expire, what do? Well, it's 30 days. I'll worry about that tomorrow. Now it's 25 days. Now it's 20 days. But I still have like a couple weeks. We're good, right? And then in the last 5 days, I'm like, oh. The next one is the lack of visibility. I find this interesting because I usually come at it from a perspective of systems engineering, right? That's what my team is. That's what we do. I don't always think of it from the perspective of the owner of that product. So at PTO, we call products, we call systems and applications products and components. So I'm not always thinking about it from their perspective, but it was very eye-opening to me when we were implementing this for the patent center, which is the 800-pound gorilla at USPTO. Since you have a patent, you've probably gone through Patent Center in order to apply for things. Your lawyers went through Patent Center. Excellent, excellent. So, being able to have the person who owns Patent Center say, wow, that was very useful to know what my attack vector was, to know what my certificates looked like, to know when they're going to expire, to understand how the costs are put together for his particular service from a whole host of different information or variables. It was great. He really loved that. So what did we end up doing? We ended up, USPTO about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, ended up going with Venafi. So I'm gonna read this here for you guys. So Venafi's trust protection platform secures and protects keys and certificates. Well, that's cool. That's exactly what we want. And it increases USPTO's security posture by reducing the attack vector and enabling us to respond faster. Those were all the things that we needed at that point in time. And so what I really liked about it, though, was that it had the ability natively to integrate with thousands of our applications, with a lot of our custom APIs. And more importantly, I was able to go in and create custom scripts. We were able to use their adaptable applications in order to connect with other things as well. So USPTO, and this is kind of the crux of this particular presentation, basically said, all right, we're going to use Venafi as our certificate lifecycle management solution. Let's see what happened next. So there's 2 different tracks that we took. The first track was a technology track. I like to call that the easy track. The second track is governance. That's where the challenges are. So the first thing that we had to do on the governance track is we had to map our manual processes today to what Venafi allowed us to do in terms of more of an automated management system. Now I want to pause real quick. Automated means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Eventually, what we're going to talk about here is full automation, but at least up front, we want to be able to basically map what we're doing manually and add it to what we see in the Venafi workflow. So user manually generates keys, generates the CSR. My favorite is number 3, user doesn't know a policy exists. I would much rather have a system manage my policies for me than rely on my memory for any of this. We submit to the CA, we get the certificate from the CA. Again, I said separation of duties, so the PKI team then provides it to the app owner. Oh, hold on. And you hope at some point that nobody drops a ball, right? All right, so that was the governance piece of it. The technology piece of it, so the Trust Protection Platform, TPP, it has a command center, and because USPTO required a multi-cloud solution, multi-cloud hybrid solution, we had to figure out where we wanted to put it. So we actually put our command center in Azure. It's the closest to a lot of the identity management systems that we have, using Microsoft Entra, for instance. And but the problem was that if we're also in AWS and we're also in GCP, I don't actually want to build out a full Venafi on each of those sides. That's too many waste of services. You start getting some contentions. What I want to do instead is I want to minimize the negatives, which is I don't want data really to travel back and forth across the different cloud platforms. But I also want to make sure that I'm as close to those servers in those cloud platforms as possible, right? So what I want to do then is I want to have a smaller portion of it, basically just the discovery, the validation, cert issuance, monitoring. I want those smaller pieces to be in the secondary cloud platforms. And I don't mean secondary as in like people aren't using it. Actually, at USPTO, a vast majority of the products are located in AWS. A vast majority of the management systems are located in Azure. And in this way, they make sure that if any one of them has any sort of an issue, we're not completely out across the board. We also have 2 on-premise data centers. So we have one in Alexandria, and then we have a bigger one in Manassas. And so we needed to make sure that we could move from Azure. Azure, as our command center, actually manages the servers on the on-prem locations in Alexandria and Manassas. We also want to integrate with some tools. We're integrating with ServiceNow and with Okta. And we also want to make sure that all of the logs and everything that's generated by the monitoring is captured by QRadar and Splunk. So it was a pretty big lift. It took us about a year, right? I want one of the things that I want to do here is just kind of tell you guys all the things that happen, right? I stand on the shoulders of my team. There's about 6 of us who do this. And we work really closely with our Venafi Accelerator team, which is professional services. And we work really closely with our government counterparts, a lot of the technical leads that are over there as well. And so we're all like standing on each other's shoulder of giants in some sort of Ouroboros snake. And one of the things to realize is that even with all of those people, it took about a year to put all this together. And I still consider this the simple part, right? This just took time, but these are known problems. These are things that we had already understood. So what happened? Lessons learned in managing complexity. The greatest challenges we had were 100% around governance. And governance means a lot of things. Sometimes people hear the word governance and they think it's just, oh, somebody needs to tell me what to do. But it's all of that, right? It's understanding why you're doing the things that you're doing and making sure that you spell it out enough that everybody has a solid idea of what to do next. So it can be everything from what are our roles? We actually have roles for approvers at the product level, product line level, sorry about that. We have admins, and then we have a whole nother group and a whole nother role for what we call platform services branch. The platform services branch does all of our operating systems, things like that. They are different than the product branch, which has a lot of the developers. They are different than our branch, which we do all the ICAM work. So let's talk a little bit about that. So one of the greatest challenges was really understanding the complexity of existing infrastructure. I'm sure everybody here has a server under the desk story where everyone thought we were great, and then all of a sudden we start doing our network discovery and there's a whole set of systems or a whole team or a whole subnet that nobody knew included things that were critical to the running of the office or the application or whatever it may be. Because maybe there wasn't a configuration management database or CMDB back in the day. And so you kind of lost track of these sorts of things. Or we talked about tribal knowledge earlier, right? So, has anybody ever had that key person decide to retire? And when that person retires, you spend time trying to figure out what he knew. So we realized that there was actually more complexity and intricacies in the IT infrastructure than we realized. But one of the things that we did with Venafi was we performed a network discovery first, and we gave it a broad set of IP ranges. And we did this not because we thought it would catch everything, but because we wanted to see what was the gap between our CMDB, our policy repository, or our governance kind of repository, and what Venafi could find on its own. So this was more of a experiment than it was, okay, this is going to be the end-all, be-all. We're just going to do network discovery and everything's going to be great. It was interesting, actually. It was pretty interesting. Like I said, it got us about 85% of the way there. And then what we had to do was end up documenting a lot of that information and reaching out to the application owners and the product team, and sometimes trying to find out who owned it, right? Again, like server under the desktop sort of thing. We had to figure out who owned some of these items. Nobody had ever heard of them before. And then we used that documentation to support any sort of the future infrastructure improvements that we needed. Each product is unique. I always like to add this one because, we always talk about how nobody is a delicate and unique flower. There's always something we have in common with each other. But as you and I both know, products all have their own little picadillos, their little idiosyncrasies. They have a different configuration here. They have a different need there. And exception management is a part of governance. So these different scopes and requirements and outcomes meant that we had to meet very regularly with all of these product owners in order to really understand what they needed. Because the last thing I wanted to do was to build out this entire infrastructure. And I don't know if you guys have done this before, but you build it out and nobody comes. It was not a Field of Dreams moment. Luckily, this one is doing pretty good, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So exceptions and waivers ends up becoming a challenge for our governance, a challenge for our technology teams, and a challenge for security. The more you have exceptions, the more you have opportunities for security breaches. So wherever possible, we wanted to find something that would make everybody happy, which is hard. That was really hard, I'll just say that. Finding that common ground was really important to creating that cohesive set of policies. So we had to be flexible and adaptable. Integrations, we encountered unexpected challenges. One of the first teams, I always believe in that adage, drink your own champagne. Some people say eat your own dog food, but I see what my dogs eat and I would never do that. But drink your own champagne, right? So the first people that we put onto this was our F5s. F5 acts kind of like a key store, and we need certificates for all the VIPs, and the VIPs are what all the applications are behind. So sure, we should be able to do that. And because my team always believes in doing it to us first, we did all of our different ICAM servers. So we run SailPoint, we have Okta, we have Enterprise Directory Services, we have Entra, all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, which ones can we put it on? Everything should be pretty normal, right? Oh, wait, what? Okta? Well, we have a VIP. We use Okta's Identity as a Service. It's up in the cloud. And we have a VIP that we have to manage. We want all those certificates to be managed through Venafi. Oh, I guess we're gonna have to create some sort of a custom integration pattern for it. I tried not to do a waiver, but here I go. Myself, my own team, we needed a waiver for how we were a little bit different than everyone else. Now, luckily, a lot of you guys use Okta as well, so somebody else had already developed what they call an adaptable application. So that was a custom piece from Venafi that they were able to go ahead and work with an identity as a service, or basically a software as a service application, and make a connection to Okta and get that certificate under its umbrella. So that was pretty good. But you're constantly discovering something new from week to week. And my favorite is welcome to working for the government. Diverse mix of NPEs, and here's why. The government needs to work under this concept of limited monies. We don't believe in VCs. We don't believe in angel investors. And we do believe in being responsible with everybody's monies, whether it be from taxes or from fees for services. And because of that, there's going to be some applications that are not being actively developed anymore. We have to make decisions about where that budget is going to go. And so when we make those decisions, sometimes sometimes those servers don't get updated for years. Maybe they'll never get refactored because only 100 people need them, but that 100 people really need it. There are systems at PTO that are older than my niece, and she just graduated from college, and they're never going to be touched. But Venafi was able to work with us to get all of them underneath that same umbrella. And it wasn't easy. All right, but success, because governance was the greatest problem, success depended on our people. So when we were looking at how do we roll out Venafi, the greatest challenge that I thought we were going to have was adoption resistance. So, as a government organization, you have people who are there sometimes for a couple of decades. I felt like the new person on the group for my first 3 years. And so when you talk about these workflows and these processes and the ways that they've done things before, I got the impression that nobody wanted to change. And there's a certain amount of that, right? Change can be scary, and certainly if I don't tell them that it's coming or I don't help them understand what it is, then there is going to be a lot of resistance. But after we started deploying it to everybody, and I kind of am thankful for, remember I said patent centers, the 800-pound gorilla? We reached out to them and we're like, hey, you guys are significantly important. You are one of our major attack vectors. If you're looking at the security posture of PTO, it all depends on the security posture of Patent Center. And we asked them if they wanted to join, and they're a little hesitant. They didn't go full automation on day one. They did their, lab servers first, and then they did their staging servers, and there's like a month in between each of these. And then they did their production servers, but still manual. And then they finally decided that they would go with automation. That basically broke open the dam. Well, if it's good enough for Patent Center, it's good enough for me. So we started having people actually reach out to us and go, when is it going to be our turn to enroll? I think that really speaks to the fact that this solution is really needed, and people are looking for ways that automation can make their jobs better. I know that there are assumptions that automation means that people are not going to have a job, and I know that, especially since we're all technical folks here, right? Everyone assumes that it means that I'm going to be out of a job and I'm going to be resistant to that. I think we're all kind of smart enough now that automation really is all we've been doing all along, and now we're just doing it at a slightly bigger scale, right? Whether it's a little shell script I wrote like 20 years ago, or whether it's using Venafi's automation now, these things are important. So the next item, if we look over here, let me see what it is. So it is about the training. It's always about the training. And so the training was something that we did quite a bit of, and we did it constantly. Any team that was onboarded, we ended up having about 4 different meetings with them and actually walking through their enrollment with them. Walking through their enrollment was actually pretty important because that's when we discovered a lot of interesting items. We discovered servers that we didn't realize were there. We discovered integration patterns that we didn't realize we had to make. And we're hoping that as we go through this, we'll find fewer and fewer of those new discoveries each time. The cross-functional collaboration was important because, like I said before, it's a government organization. There needs to be separation of duties, which means we needed to have a really good engagement with everybody, whether it's be IT security or the platform services branch or someone from the product level. Oh, documents, artifacts, and knowledge, the bane of my existence. It's really easy to say, okay, that was the thing, let's go and do it. And my engineers will be like, okay, I'm gonna go and do it, everything's great. And then, who wants to document this? Crickets. Nobody wants to document anything. One of the things that we did when we first went in there is like, look, guys, we're gonna have to we did a conceptual diagram, a logical diagram, and a physical diagram. And it's kind of funny because, people are like, do we really need that? I'm like, yeah, we kind of really need that. And then months later, they're like, okay, well, we're having a little issue. I don't know why it's slowing down here. they'd pop out one of those diagrams. Or we're justifying it to, as with any government organization, you have to justify what you buy and make sure that it's still relevant and that they're going to be able to fund it. And they could not conceive it if I were just talking about it, so I'd break out a conceptual diagram. Made the world of difference. And so for us, that kind of the artifact, the knowledge repository that we have was actually super important. And the other thing was that creating the tailored workflows. One of the things that we really liked working with Venafi about is that we had a lot of different workflows that were specific to that application, or that, in other words, we call them products, right? So specific to that product and that component. And we were able to actually look at the different policies. So let's say that there was an internal server only used by internal finance people, and they only need it once a quarter. Well, maybe my policy could say that a 1-year certificate for expiration should be fine. That should be fine. But now let's go back to our patent center example. Well, that's going to be customer facing. It's going to be incredibly, it's a juicy target for anybody who's trying to get into PTO. It requires a lot of people to maintain. So there's a lot of opportunity for human error, all of that stuff. So for Patent Center, we might look at a 90-day certificate for them. And in fact, by the end of this year, we are going to move Patent Center down to 90 days. And by the end of next year, we're going to move at least 80% of USPTO down to 30 days. Anything that is external facing. We would never be able to do that if it was just individuals. Because let's think about it, right? 10,000 servers, 10 hours each. So that's 100,000 hours per year. And this is just for annually, right? This is just annually. And that is what? Let's say an average full wrap rate. And full wrap rate from a government perspective is all the different costs that go into it. Let's say it's $100 an hour. So you're looking at $10 million a year to do certificate management. Now let's try to say, all right, well, instead of once a year, I want to do it every 90 days. I want to times that by 4. Hold on, I think that's 40 million. That's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous waste of money, honestly. Automation allows us to make that basically down to about $50,000. That is what keeps us coming back. That's what keeps USPTO funding this, is the fact that it could take that other, $39.99 million and use it for something a lot more important. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit faster, I think, to allow you guys some time to ask questions. So, but before I do that, I always love making sure that everybody understands it from a couple of different perspectives. So what is the return on investment for a technical person versus what is the return on investment for a director, a VP, a division chief at a government? Those are a couple of different things. And if anybody gets the slides afterwards, the notes are filled with a lot more information than I'm presenting on here. But here's the top 5 items that I had actually picked out for us. Enhanced security posture, I think that's a no-brainer. We're reducing the vulnerabilities. We're making sure that every server is connected to another server. We know who the identities are. We have those certificates. We have the keys. Everything is locked correctly. Everything is managed in an automated way. Expiration notices are provided, but they happen according to whatever configuration we set up on. So let's say it's a 1 year. We'll set it up to renew 11 months out. Not so long that we're losing some money on the certificates, but that 30 days gives us some grace period in case anything happens. The second item is, I feel like a game show host. Operational efficiency and cost savings. Yes, that one is good. So the concept that I just gave you before about the $40 million going down to $50,000, that's where a lot of that cost saving comes from. It comes from the elimination of manual labor. And trust me when I say that none of my systems engineers want to do this by hand. None of them. The PKI team today that does it by hand doesn't want to do it by hand. So everyone is excited about the fact that they're going to be able to work on more senior projects on additional security activities rather than having to do this by hand? Yes, please. And this gives actual cost savings to those product managers and those product owners. And so they can report up that their particular products are actually a lot more efficient as well. So that's a return on investment that they love to see. The third item is the accelerated time to release. So one of the things that we're currently working with is when we want to do an automated end-to-end when one of our product teams is looking to deploy to, let's say, AWS, right? I need a new set of servers. Here's the new VPC. They give me all the information. I should be able to enter it. We have an automated CI/CD pipeline. We're using Ansible, Terraform, CloudFormation, I mean, you name it, USPTO loves it. And so what we want is to use that CI/CD pipeline to accelerate that service time to release so that we can make things available to the product development teams a lot faster. And this way, if they needed to expand or if they needed additional servers for new features that are coming online, we're not the bottleneck. Zero Trust Regulatory Compliance. We are a government group, or I am working for a government group. I cannot say I am part of that government group. But the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office must maintain its regulatory compliance, specifically with Zero Trust, but with a lot of things that are related to that. NIST 853, NIST 863, NIST 800-171, most of the NISTs actually. So by doing so, we're going to reduce the risk of any of those financial penalties that occur or the security breaches that occur as well because of that, because of not maintaining compliance. It maintains the customer trust, it protects sensitive data. All of these things are incredibly important and is what Zero Trust is attempting to enforce within these government agencies. And then it's the foundation for scalable growth. One of the things that I think is important to realize here is that given how technology has advanced and given how everyone is starting to move all of these features online. Let me just give a quick example. I know we're running out of time. I want to give everybody time for a Q&A. So USPTO is moving to a completely digital world. We're not doing anything physical anymore. So when you apply for a patent and you get accepted and that patent is awarded to you, previously you had reams of paper that had official stamps on it. Well, we moved everything over to a document secure form flow. And so now you're getting, we actually use Adobe at this point, and we're using Adobe to put on those digital seals. And so when we start moving everything online, that's going to drastically increase the number of non-person entities or machine identities that we're going to have to track and manage. That's unscalable. You know, if you look at the graph, the number of servers are going to go up higher than the number of people can support. So let's go over here. I think this is the final items. We're going to go through these pretty quickly here. This is, now that we've gotten basic certificate lifecycle management done, we've got Venafi out there, we've put the 800-pound gorilla on there. What's in store for us in FY25? We're going to move the key stores out to expand to 100% coverage of USPTO NPEs. Right now we're at about 85%. And we're going to do reducing the TLS certificate validity periods, as I mentioned before. We're going to move down to 90 days by the end of the year and down to 30 days by the next year. Floating further into the cloud, part of that expanding the key store coverage really is using other cloud native services like Azure Key Vault and GCP Secret Manager. This one's my favorite, unique certificates. So how many of you guys are in environments where if everything is behind like an F5 or an A10 or something like that, you just put the certificate on the VIP? Everything's fine after that, right? There can't be any issues there. We are still running behind. So right now we have a lot of shared certificates. And our major push for next year with those F5 key stores is to make sure that we have a certificate for every server underneath that. And that was not feasible when everything was manual. And the final item here is automated incident response. So right now we're connected in with ServiceNow. We know when there are going to be issues. We know we're doing monitoring and reporting on the validity of the certificates and the devices to which the certificates are attached. And if there are issues, we are noticing and we are manually addressing them. However, our goal next year is to make that an automated process. We do have that automated CI/CD pipeline that we use. We can do a lot of it there. We have AWS Cert Manager. Obviously, that can help us out with a lot of the automated incident response as well. And most of it, again, is not going to be a technology problem. There are some issues, but those are known solutions to those issues. It's going to be mostly a governance challenge. So, applying what you'll learn, I hope that by next week, I put these things together because we need to, and these are really good ways for you guys to think about how you can actually bring it into your situation. But a lot of it does make sure that you guys have a commitment to actually managing your certificates across that life cycle. So, conducting the inventory, evaluating your current processes, developing your policies, that in and of itself could take 6 months instead of the first 3 months. First 3 months is if you're like ready to go. And then within 6 months, choose a certificate lifecycle management solution. I don't own stock in Venafi. We selected that. You may select something else. There's certainly lots of other options out there. And one very enterprising soul once told me that he wrote a whole bunch of scripts for it. He doesn't need anything else. So anything can be done. The point is simply to do it. All right, so further conversations. On the right-hand side are all of our USPTO folks. I have checked in with them before putting their names and email addresses on here. And especially if you are a Govy yourself, they would love to hear from you and to share stories. But if you also just have questions, feel free to email them. And then on the left-hand side are me and my folks. Feel free to email me with questions. I love talking, so I'd be happy to do so. I think we're really close to our time. If you do have any questions, please come on up, but I will be here outside afterwards as well. Please.
Not on.
Phone on, microphone on. So the automation, I agree, right? It turns one person into 1,000 octopi. So, but the question is, that I always have with automation, especially in processes like these, where it involves authenticity of identity of machines to machines and machines to people and people to machines, is have you determined the appropriate place, and I think there's always at least one in every flow, where the human can look in, or where the human can say, okay, these 150,000 changes can all occur now, or do you just don't do that and you wait till 150,000 changes all occur at the same time and someone stuck change number 151,000 on there and all of a sudden everything went.
That is a really good question, right? Because we've had situations like that before with other products. And so it goes down to really two answers. The first answer is that every product gets to decide how automated they want to be. So not every product has decided to be completely automated. There's actually a couple of folks who really want to go in there and have that manual approval process. So it's automated, stops, then they approve it, and then it continues on. And I think a lot of it is dependent on what the risk level is of their product, how much they have. We have to be really good at capacity management and assumption of the risk, right? Who gets to say that it's okay to be that automated, and who gets to bear responsibility if it happens? I will say it's not one size fits all. Some people are going to be able to use automation very easily, but we don't mandate that. So,
Right.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
I think the key question in my mind is you have to ask the people when you're trying to determine how much risk they're capable or tolerant of, is what happens if?
Absolutely.
And if their answer
Absolutely.
is like, I don't know, they're like, well,
Yeah.
we're going to tell you to be in the process because you have no idea what happens if you
The
go
more
wrong.
mature products get more automation, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you.
Mike on.
Can we get that other mic?
Mike on.
Mike?
Hey,
Hi,
there
thank
you
you.
are.
Just a quick one. So I assume for your external-facing servers, you're using a trusted commercial CA. If not, you're using some interim. So what's your solution?
We actually have both. So we have a USPTO certificate authority for internal servers and anything that we need to manage. We have a lot of relationships with other government agencies. So our internal servers are generally pretty good. Our internal CA is generally pretty good for that. But then we use Intrust for anything public facing.
So how do you integrate with that commercial CA then?
Oh, the
Or
Venafi does that, right? So it actually has within its own automation processes the ability to send out CSRs to that CA and then to receive it back. And once it receives the information back, it processes it and applies it to those servers. And once it applies it to the servers, it can even bounce the servers if
So
it's needed.
hate to monopolize. So for us, there's a cost incurred for every commercial certificate we
Yes.
buy. So I assume you
Yes.
have just an account and you accrue those certificates. How do you manage that so you don't blow over your budget?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of custom reporting that we do, and we make sure that, remember how I said like the product owner likes having visibility into their entire certificate landscape? A lot of it is because of that, right? They need to make sure that they're managing to their budget. And then we have the ability to determine when that certificate ends up being renewed, and we try to push it as close to the end as possible. If it's something that we know, like the internal CAs that we have, we can push that down to just 2 weeks, so we're only losing 2 weeks, but that gives us a grace period. Unfortunately, with external CAs, because we can't rely on them, I mean, they're reliable, but we can't rely on them. We usually give them about a month. Once we move down to the 90-day, though, that's when we're going to actually have to start squeezing that, and that's when questions like yours become something that goes into the governance realm.
Thanks.
First off, thank you. This was the best talk I've attended today. And my question is, if you can speak to it a little bit, like what does the automation look like? Is it like there's like a process on the production workload server that goes out and renews the CA?
Yeah,
That's what
absolutely.
renews the cert.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to share with you like what that looks like. We have a diagram for it. But what it basically does is the TPP servers, and how much time do we have?
We were going to allow one more question here in the blue.
The TPP servers basically have they have a SQL database, and that SQL database has the list of all the servers that it needs to manage certs for and the validation periods and all of that organized in a tree manner. It's really, I would actually point you out maybe to the Venafi folks, but I'd be happy to chat with you more about it out there because it's a pretty complicated process, but I don't actually have to actively manage most of it, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
But yeah,
I
I'll
got
chat
all
with
that.
you
Thank
more later. That'd be great.
All right.
Yes.
So I have a question on the third-party certificates, right? You know, we do have some SaaS solutions which is vendor provided, and we need to renew those manually. So how we address that challenge to automate?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the Okta example that I gave you. Okta, we use SaaS. Okta's in AWS, but we have VIPs on it that we need to manage the certificates for so that Okta can actually perform single sign-on for our internal and hybrid servers, right? So when we do that, we actually are using Venafi's adaptable application, and that adaptable application is a set of custom code that allows us to add the integration pattern to get up to a SaaS product. They have thousands of those in there.
So they renew at application level too?
They'll do it at the application level as well. Yep.
But that's another
Yep,
cost
absolutely.
involved. Okay, thank you.
Leona, there's one more gentleman.
Sure.
with a
I have the time if you
question.
have the time, Steve.
Yeah, that's okay. Everybody's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind.
What about keys? Where do they live? On the actual assets?
They live on the assets. yeah.
Always? Or do we have exceptions?
We are an uncomplicated use case because we're government. We can't get super crazy about that. All of our keys are on the assets right now. There is some talk out of our product development teams that they want to move to a completely dynamic Kubernetes solution. There are other solutions for how to manage keys through that, or other secrets, basically. Like if a whole bunch of the groups that are in AWS are using AWS Cert Manager for a lot of their secrets, and then Venafi just manages those. But the keys themselves, right now we're just doing they're just on the assets. One day we may get more complicated, but not today.
That means CSR is being generated right on the asset, that means.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Good call.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you, Leona. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you so
Everybody
much.
give a hand for Leona, and please remember to fill out your conference survey for the session and everything.